This is a committee of the whole meeting. Mayor Pro Tem is going to be running a little bit late this morning. He's still finishing up some work that he does outside of this, believe it or not. So he asked me if I could just step in for him until he's able to get here. So we're going to call the special committee of the whole meeting to order. The record please reflect that it's 9:02 and it's Saturday, December 9, 2017. Got a motion to enter into this meeting? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. We are in open meeting. First, I'd like to thank all the employees for coming this morning, taking some time out of your weekend to help us, the board members, understand basically the inner workings of how our government works and how we're able to move forward on projects and budget and finance these things. So thank you very much for your commitment and dedication showing up this morning. We greatly appreciate it. There's going to be a lot of information here that's going to be divulged to us over the next, hopefully, couple hours or less. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I think everybody had a great opportunity to read through these binders that were prepared for us. A lot of information here. There's a slideshow that was attached in the front part of your binder that we are going to go through. I would ask that, you know, as we're going through some of these financials, this is a great time to do a kind of ask the staff members specific questions about specific areas of business here in Tinley. This would be a great time to do that. So keep an open mind, and hopefully you have a lot of questions, because this is really the process of how we could talk about agendas all day long, talk about processes and what we want to see done, but this is kind of where the meat and potatoes and how it all begins. And the staff is in place to do that. So without further ado, I think I'll turn it over at this time to our esteemed manager, Dave Neal.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I do want to thank everyone, the board, for coming out, as well as the staff on a Saturday morning in the middle of holidays, so appreciate that commitment. I do want to especially thank a lot of the departments have put a lot of effort into putting this together, but I want to give special thanks to the finance department, Amy, Eileen, and Ruth, who have really slaved, and I don't, yes. I know we had at least a couple late nights, including last night, that we're here to finalize this thing. So thank you, as well as Lisa, who's kind of organized a lot of this and put together the breakfast. So thank you. So this mid-year budget is something that we typically do this time of year for a couple of reasons. One is it's kind of an assessment of where we're at in terms of the fiscal year budget. And again, for those new to the budget process, the village operates on a May 1st to April 30th budget year. So this is really about the time. It's a little past the mid-year, but it gives us the time to be able to kind of look where we're at through the 6-month process. There's also some decisions that we made in the last budget year where we allocated some funds for positions in the mid-year budget that we traditionally make those decisions today, and then there's a few of those towards the end of this process. What's different this year is that we are really also allocating this time to essentially review our strategic plan. And I think those of you aware, the strategic plan was just something we were working on last year, the year before that. This is really kind of the first full year we've had to kind of measure its results. And I think it's very important that we try to tie in what we're doing with the strategic plan with the budget, because the strategic plan is essentially the board's list of priorities. And a budget really should reflect what the strategic plan priorities are. So that's why, you know, we're doing this at the same time. So it's really kind of two parts of the discussion, you know, the plan and actually the budget, but the two are related. So that's what's different this year. And I would say what's also different this year is there's a lot more kind of preliminary information on budget requests that we expect next year. Typically, you would not see these items until usually around February. So again, a lot of extra work up front, but with that in mind, keep in mind, it's more preliminary than it typically would be. But we wanted to at least kind of get in front of you what we thought some of the priorities should be here. But again, this is essentially the board's plan and the board's budget. So we're here to kind of tell you what we see, but ultimately, what we really need, Dan, is kind of your kind of active feedback in terms of what you see, in terms of both the planning efforts. There's some items I'm going to talk about that are non-budget related, even though a lot of the focus is going to be on the budget. So in your packet, there's a number of things. There's a PowerPoint, which will really be what we'll go through today. There's a lot of backup data, which we really is really more there for reference. Things such as the 5-year capital plan. And so as we go through the budget, and again, for those new to the budget process, the budget, you have items, you have personnel items, which is really the majority of the department's budget. There's things like commodities, office supplies, training, things like that. But then there's a capital budget. And the capital are things from water main improvements to fire trucks to things like the plaza. Also includes things like potential land acquisition, the mental health center. And so the 5-year plan is in here. Like a lot of municipalities, the farther you go out sometimes on these plans, the harder it is to really predict those numbers. So I would say, it's important to really focus, I think, especially on the first year or two. But we put 5-year projections in there that we will indeed, as we get and give you a final budget, we'll certainly refine those numbers. So again, that's attached as an appendix. The actual, then there's a few items related to, there's really kind of 3 sets of goals. I mentioned the strategic plan, which was something adopted by the last board last year. So I don't plan on going through that in detail. I plan on hitting some of the highlights in the PowerPoint, but that's referenced back here. And again, feel free to ask questions or suggest changes from that, because again, the strategic plan is not a document that's cast in stone. So that's back there as a reference. There's also 2 other, what I call goal documents that are referenced. One is the objectives and goals that the board gave me back in September, which the staff is aware of, and it's, again, there's a little bit of overlap to some of the strategic plan, but it's many of the things that we've been working on related to development, personnel succession, the staffing study, and again, that will be referenced in the PowerPoint. The third thing that's in there is actually some goals that were actually developed by the staff in a retreat that we had at the convention center back on November 21st. And so there's a number of items on there that we discussed as items, and some of these, again, if you look at the item, there's about 18 goals, and they're listed as B and A, and it fairly simply means if it's B, it's a goal that requires some budget resources. If it's A, it's simply an administrative issue, but nevertheless something that we need to work on. So again, that's really there for references. We also asked the staff to come up with some ideas on potential revenue and expense items that are not part of this budget. And again, that's more there for your reference, and if there's things you want to talk about in there, we'd be glad to do it. And then finally, the last tab, and we'll discuss this as part of the PowerPoint, is the actual proposed budget schedule. We would like to kind of get some commitment from the board on a schedule, at least for the critical March date where we actually will review the proposed draft budget. Because that is usually a session like this. We could do it on a Saturday morning, we could do it at a night, but typically will require several hours of your time. So that.
Could we just go ahead and let's go right to the scheduling part of it first? So while we're all fresh, let's get that out of the way.
Okay,
Let's go
sure.
over that.
Sure, okay. So the schedule, basically, so obviously we have the presentation today. There's really over the next month and a half, is a lot of internal items that we're doing. This is really more listed for the board's reference. We're working on getting budgets and revised expenditure estimates submitted to Finance Department by December 22nd. Final requests are January 12th. Then we'll be reviewing these internally. I've spoken with, obviously, Trustee Mangan has been our finance liaison, and he's going to be actively involved with this and actually going to be meeting with myself and Brad in these discussions with the department heads, which I think will be good because we'll have kind of someone who can talk about the detail of what he's heard in these meetings. So where the board will really start to get involved will be towards the middle to end of March. And so you will get the budget basically the week of February 12th. So in the past, we typically have run some of these things through committees, but we haven't always done that. So that's a subject to think about, whether you want each of the committees to review their individual areas. But we do have an all-day session, and the timing on this is critical that we do this in the early part of March, because one, assuming there's going to be changes, we'll need to put it in final form. We will then have to post a notice of a public hearing at the end of March, and there's a requirement that that notice be posted for a certain amount of days. The hearing is typically held 2 weeks before the adoption, and so what we're looking at as a proposal is Saturday, March 3rd. So if people know their schedules, if that's okay, we can block that off now. So looking for any feedback on that.
I'd be fine with it, I just don't know when Andrew's spring break is, so it's the only not that.
Okay.
We could look into that.
We could check that.
The first total really is everybody's okay with Saturday mornings, minus the staff probably.
Yeah, okay.
Is every board member okay with the Saturday morning?
Yeah.
I mean, that's-
Yes.
I think it's just easier for us to really comprehend what's going on as opposed to an evening after working all day or whatever.
I agree. I think I agree.
So staff's okay with that? You guys can
Sure,
bear the brunt?
sure.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I think
All right, so
the only
then-
thing that weekend is probably what they would consider the Catherine Plastic Day, so I don't know if students have Monday off or whatever, that would be the
On that
only
Monday.
Thing that ever hits on that weekend. Well, it does, doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Easter is the very end of April, or the end of March. End of March.
All right.
So we do know that Easter is like April 1st or something.
Well, it sounds like March 3rd will work. We'll check on,
We can reach out to the school districts and just verify when spring breaks are. I think that'd be the best for everyone.
yeah.
She said 2:30 is the last week of March.
Okay. So we should be safe to go in the beginning of March.
So March 3rd should work.
I think it's a very good tentative. I mean, obviously, there's 2 members that aren't here, but it's tentative. It should be good to go.
All right. We'll put that on the board's calendar then.
So that one there.
All right, so, anyway, so we'll get into the PowerPoint now. And again, this is, I'll emphasize, I think, this is a very ambitious agenda we have, and so we really need kind of your focus on priorities. The staff is certainly, myself are committed to moving this forward
Yeah.
and spending the energies to make sure this is implemented, but we want to make sure we understand and that we know your priorities, and that's why this is such a critical meeting, because your priorities will help us determine what goes in the budget. So,
Can I say something about that, Dave?
yeah, go ahead.
So from my view being new, I look at this as a two-way kind of communication. That, we really got to hear from you guys, kind of where you need to be too. So I think as we look at this thing, we go out 4 or 5 years, we know that some of the infrastructure in town, we have to make some serious changes to some pieces of it. It's really important that we kind of hear from staff as we go into this meeting, because I think it helps us then to be able to take this and kind of develop it from the finance side of it, especially. I'm talking from the finance side. that we have, so any input from you guys as we go through the budgetary process, I think you gotta help us look out a little farther, because I think the big animal in the room is that we have to kind of start to look for how we can finance things going down the road if we expect something to happen. So Chief, an example is the firehouse, we're doing a firehouse, we're looking at a second firehouse, how are we gonna get there for the second firehouse? We have to start thinking ahead on those things, and that's what I'm trying to kind of get my arms around the best I can right now, and working with Brad and Dave to do that. So just any input from you guys, we really appreciate it.
Okay, let's get started. So the first part is we're going to review our mid-year budget numbers, and so Ruth, you're gonna. Okay.
Basically, we've given you a summary of 5 of our different, what we would consider sort of our primary funds. The general fund, of course, is our primary operating fund, which funds public safety, the general side of public works, it funds fire safety, all the various administrative departments. And that is the one that's largely supported by the revenues of sales tax, property taxes, things of that nature. And so what you have here is 2 columns, the last fiscal year's budget and where we actually came in as of the end of the year, as well as in the second column is the current year. And we've done preliminary projections, and I would really stress that these are preliminary because there's a lot of unknowns and variables yet at this point in time. So one thing I can explain though, in last year's expenditures, that does include a transfer at the end of the year of $6 million that went over to the capital fund that then funded the capital items that were requested for the current fiscal operating year. So that's why the numbers, when you're looking at them, will seem a little different. So at this point in time, we're anticipating possibly having approximately $4 million that we can slot over to dedicate for potential capital purchases at this point in time in the general fund. And then below the general fund, you have the water and sewer fund and commuter parking funds. Those are proprietary funds, which means they're a total different type of fund. The water sewer obviously is the water fund that supports the water operations. And you can't really use those funds to pay for general fund items, okay? The same thing with commuter parking lot, that's a separate proprietary fund for the maintenance of those parking lots, things like that. And then we've also given you 2 special revenue funds, which are the motor fuel tax and the hotel motel tax fund. And overall, it tells you where we anticipate right now coming in at the end of the year, but as I stressed, it's preliminary, okay? Any questions on that slide? If not, we can go to the next.
So just, yeah, and again, I think that 4 million is worth noting because that has been kind of our long-standing practice, not unusual practice, that those things get moved towards capital. But to clarify, this is money that we have in addition to our kind of our standing reserves, which we keep in place for contingencies and which is kind of recommended by government finance officers. So a lot of this is typically due to positions that aren't filled during the year, other projects that aren't done. So that's one of the main reasons why you see, as you can see, because we're really about 3 million below what we were estimating to be spent. A lot of that is really positions that haven't been filled.
So we have a slide on that.
Yeah. Yep.
So the next one gives it to you by the general fund only. It gives it to you kind of a breakdown by department of how we're doing. Again, with the same overall totals. Like I said, these will be subject to change as we go through the balance of the year. A lot depends on the type of winter we have, that is especially in the street department for snow removal. We have not cut anything there at all, and anticipating we may need it all. And a few years ago, we needed more than all of it. So there are a lot of variables in that number. The next slide, though, Pat has the actual grant summary, kind of telling you which revenue sources have come in. We kind of picked the things that were probably more than $10,000 to $15,000 greater than budgeted. So these are the items that have come in greater than we had initially budgeted. And then we've also given you a few of the expenditures, on the expenditure side where we've saved money, primarily on the health insurance that reviewed in October, and salaries and other operating line items which come for the savings overall that come to that same 4 million number. Are there any questions on that?
Okay. All right, Trustee Manganiello has suggested that we hit some highlights of our, kind of our current plan, and really that rolls a little bit into what some of our, at least initial capital projects are in the public works area for next year. This is a really good summary of our projects that are in the budget this year. A lot of these, as you'll see, and you'll understand why, will be items that we're not going to spend this year and roll over. The first few areas are a couple areas that are very familiar. We have $9.6 million allocated for the mental health center, as well as other TIP projects. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a tab in back that has the detail on this. But I can tell you for the mental health center, there's 6.5 million in there, and that includes 4.1 million for land acquisition, 2 million for cleanup, and then another 300,000 to finish the plan. So again, these are all budgeted numbers, not a commitment to spend, but that's what's driving that. And in addition, the TIF projects of that, TIF projects portion of that includes really, most of that is kind of the downtown projects, which is South Street and North Street. And again, obviously with the South Street project, at this point, not moving forward, that will be something we'll want to revisit in the budget this year, because there is $2.5 million in upgrades in this year's budget for that, and as well as $435,000 for North Street. The plaza expansion, I mean, that's.
Dave, just on
Go ahead.
that, just
Sure.
to be clear though, with the 2.5 million of infrastructure that we had in there, there's a portion of that that is going to need to be done no matter if
Yes.
South Street happens or not.
Absolutely.
So we want to make sure that we understand that.
What was the figure on that, what was the estimate on that?
Right around $1 million?
174 South
175
Street.
and 67.
Or, yeah, 67. There was a number that was floating around, I don't remember.
The number that was out there that we were talking through, I think it was right around $1 million, of stuff that would have to be done. Now, give or take 100 grand, it's right in that ballpark, but that was kind of what we were
Right, we're
talking
still
about.
getting to do, of course.
Because with the South Street project, we knew we had to do some of it already. It was kind of happening. And
Yeah,
those were
so some of it's the water main. Water main's 50 to 60 years old.
Yeah.
It's cast iron. It's going to need to be replaced sooner or later. Even if nothing was built there, it'll be on our schedule to replace that water main. Same thing with lining some of the sanitary.
So I just wanted to kind of just make sure we kind of, in that 2.5 million, some of that still might have to be adjusted.
Yeah, okay. Next one, again, our branding projects, plaza expansion and branding, there's 8 million in there. The majority of that money, there's 7.5 million in for the downtown plaza expansion. Most of that money was money from our normal capital fund. We also transferred and closed a trust fund that was about $1.8 million, I think, Bruce, right? Yeah.
1.6.
1.6, okay, yeah. So, again, we'll have, once we site the plaza, and we'll then be able to refine these numbers a little bit better, but that's something obviously that we'll be carrying over to next year. Infrastructure, road and bridge projects, I'm going to touch on some of these on the next couple slides. The water and sewer projects, and again, this is obviously an item we have every year, but it includes things like our finishing up our water meter replacement program, which is about $300,000 this year. Aligning of a 24-inch water main on 167th Street. Putting in Actually, the water, there's also an additional one for the iPearls, which is about $900,000. And also post 4 and 5 lift station improvements. So this is obviously an annual number, a little bit higher this year because we're in the final phase of our meter replacement. Freedom Pond and other flood control projects, again, that's money that we anticipate the Freedom Pond portion will be done in the spring. Facility-related improvements are just a variety of building-related improvements that are in every year's budget. And it's really things like there's a reserve for resurfacing the fire training tower lots, parking lot repairs, municipal lots, HVAC units at the police department, and again, there's a whole list of municipal building improvements in the back. 911 monies, pretty small, nothing significant there. No. The equipment, again, there's a whole list of equipment in the back. The rolling stock includes our vehicle replacement programs, and there's a whole list from police and public works in back in terms of what we're spending this year. Technology projects and hardware include some of the things we've been talking about, such as the software for the community development department, timekeeping software, and a number of other improvements that are in our technology division. So, again, this is this year's budget. So, as you can see, we've really only spent out of the 46. It's a couple of points. It's high because you have some massive projects, the mental health center, plaza expansion, to name a couple that we're not. Once those are done, you know, you're not going to have that type of money being spent every year. But that is the nature of capital. Capital, your general fund, your personnel, and other expenditures typically increase usually around a factor of inflation, where your capital can be really high one year and not high the next, depending on what your needs are. So, but as you can see, we spent about 25% this year, and there'll be a little bit more spent, but we won't reach anywhere near the actual budget amount because of the mental health center and the plaza primarily, not really spending anything significant on that. So again, this is this year. Any questions on that page?
For me, just on the technology side, that's another thing I think that, you know, as we go forward, we really got to improve our systems. And I think everyone in this room would agree with that. And that's where we got to kind of get some feedback, because as I've been here for 6.5 months, I dread the fact that you guys going through this every single day. There's things that really have to improve here from the technology, you know, point of view. So we really got to get some input going on that. I know some things are already in the works in certain areas, but I think that's a benefit that can happen as we go forward, especially being able to kind of improve the technology through the village.
Give you a little note on that, with Public Works, we're in the midst of doing our work order system for Public Works, make it more friendly to use. Also, we're getting iPads to the guys in the trucks. We'll actually do the work order out on site. We'll be taking pictures with that work order with the iPads. We just actually got the iPads in, but IT is not programming them.
That's great.
And we should be going live with that system for the next couple of weeks. So
That's great.
and then it'll be easier for the public. Yeah.
And I think, you know, if you look at just that piece, if we could do that across the spectrum of the village as a whole, you know, we got inspectors, we got, you know, all the things that we got going on, that if, you know, we can iPad drive this back to someone in the office, it's just so more efficient. And those are the things that we got to start thinking about, you know, from the bigger picture. And then just the fact that the amount of information we input into our systems, and they're not, and some of the systems aren't talking to the other systems, you know, those are some of the things that I think will be beneficial as we look going forward to.
And I think certainly having the kind of the new leadership position of the IT manager, I think will help a lot.
Yeah.
That's critical. So I don't know if there was any questions. I know trustee Lotz had a question on one of the capital expenses this year from the police department.
Yeah, Dave, I had a question on the rolling stock. We spent $100,000 more than was budgeted for the, it's on page 2, and it was at the top one. We
For
spent
the police
100.
interceptor?
Yep, we spent $100,000 more than we budgeted.
But did you get the new revised sheet?
It was just a presentation. You'll see the one line was 99 and the other one was 97 under.
Okay.
The invoice came in with just a dollar amount, so that was actually reallocated. So it was actually $2,000 under budget.
Thank you.
Should we get that new one?
All the notes are on the
Yeah. I'd like to say.
Yeah, we apologize, we've been working with the new, creating the capital and the new table, and it just, you know,
We get it. It's all
really
good.
get it lined up in the right ones.
Dave, since Mike put so much time into the IT conversation, let's just talk about the philosophy of moving forward. I noticed some things in the budget here for the next 5 years, and I know you and I chatted about this morning, but I think it's important because I identified it, and I'm certain that, I mean, this is a public document, it's going to be identified by more people as well. Fiscal year, it got us down at 378,000, I think, if I remember correctly.
Talk about for IT.
Yes,
projects.
capital. Yeah. I mean, if the philosophy moving forward from this board administration as well as the staff wanting to see it done, obviously we've identified that in strat planning and retreats and the rest of the stuff and conversations, and this is a major concern that most people have here in the village. Why are we only allocating a small portion of resources to that department? And then when you look at a 5-year, it's increased substantially by like $500,000. Like, so this year, I mean, we've identified this thing as being an issue for a couple of years now. How come it's scaled back, and then why are we really amping it up moving forward? Is there an explanation for it, or is it just simply that as we move forward, we're gonna need more IT? Because if that's the case, and that's
Some of
why I
it's in
just
our
want
own
to know.
departments, in our own department budgets. They're not separated out. I mean, at least for us.
So you're saying yours is in?
I've got mine in my own budget.
Okay.
Yeah, Public Works says the same thing. Like,
Same thing.
That cartograph process is a huge undertaking. You're not gonna see that on this line item.
So I think, just for the purposes of moving forward then, for the next part of this process for us, can we kind of consolidate all that so we can see it in a nutshell? Because I mean, we're moving this village, this organization's moved from being somewhat antiquated over the
Yeah.
previous 5 years to move
This does
something that we're going to see
summarize all
moving
the
forward.
departments together, so the 843 plus the 105 is technically what is budgeted for technology related. That's on the summary, the capital summary.
For all departments?
Yes,
Yeah, for all.
that's
So
picked up
that
all
is
the
the
technology
consolidated,
departments.
that's consolidated
yes.
amongst all the
That is
departments.
the consolidated.
So this village is budgeting $850,000 for technology as a whole.
Plus another 105 for the
All right, so
hardware.
we'll round up to
$1
$1
million,
million.
say, $1 million. Okay.
Page 1. Your 5-year.
I'm going to ask either Chief Reed or Finance. There's a trustee Glass just asked me a question. In 2020, and I think I know the answer, it might be related to the station, there's a bump from about 2.2 million. 5-year plan.
It's gotta be at least.
Oh, that's not, no, that's, oh, I'm sorry, that's. Which one are you talking about? Well, police or fire? Police. Okay, it's actually, all right. Yeah, so there's a bump in the 5-year capital for police from 795 to 3 million, and then 3.5 the next year.
That goes back down to 500,000.
We know that, or
Research.
I think it's in the brief. I think at some point it was discussed, the big thing, if you look at that, in the detail, it's for moving the range. It's always been part of the move down later in the years, was moving the range. So I think all of that budget is spread out over moving the range back over to the police department. and moving that.
So that must be why on page 2, for those years, you have a 2 and a 3 million.
I I don't know which page number, yes, that's, I know that that was a huge factor in moving that resolution.
And you spent the targeting system, I saw that was like 87,000, it's done.
Yeah, the targeting part is the portion of that.
So, a lot of these, you know, as you get further out, a lot of these large capital projects, we still have to figure out how we're gonna pay for some of those. So, if something is shown in 2020, doesn't mean we necessarily.
Just preface the forecasting and how municipalities and governments typically, this isn't, can you just give us some, I mean, I think that might be a misunderstanding here.
Yeah, it's so, you know, for capital, that it's usually kind of a good best practice to budget your capital out 5 years. But with that, you know, there's a lot of money that's put in for, okay, we think we need this in 2 years. But the hard discussions on how you're going to pay for that haven't necessarily happened. So look at this as something that this is what the police department would like to do in a couple of years. But obviously, until we figure out how we're going to pay for that. And that's similar to the discussion we had with the second fire station renovation. It's a priority, but obviously the hard decision on how we're going to pay for those still need to be had. So that's, I think, just something to look at when you see all these capital numbers and you see, oh my gosh, and it greatly exceeds more than what we have. It's because we really haven't had the revenue portion.
And as we go through the budget, I think part of
Yeah.
it's gonna be prioritizing
Yep.
what we think are the most important things. I mean, and we
Yeah.
gotta do it as a team. You know, we have to prioritize this piece because, you know, I think, no question, we'd love to have the 2 firehouses, there's no question. But, you know, if we do, then something else has to step back. And that's what we kind of have to, all have to agree to. And I think that's why going through the budget process, I think it'll help with, you know, making that happen.
Well, you'll see that when we present our budgets to you. We always give you a priority list. We'll put it in our priority, then you guys
Make the decision.
You can make a decision on that. But on the best of our abilities, you can put the prioritization. And carryovers are always first.
How long did that first firehouse get pushed off? I mean, it was years.
Yeah.
We're actually making progress on that.
Yeah, that's great.
So I think going back to the IT, I think what I hear in IT, Mayor, is that maybe just a little bit of explanation of all the components, because right now, yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
just
up,
kind of break down.
it is up here,
Yeah,
and
just
I guess moving forward, and
Yeah,
this might
okay.
be discussed more in budget, more of the hardcore budget
Yeah.
requirements and requests. I just want everyone to start really analyzing and thinking about, are we putting enough effort to it?
Yeah.
Does it need more of it, does it need more of
Okay.
attention? Because it's consistently been it's always discussed as being an issue here. I mean, amongst everyone, I would feel, everybody should not even read, so I assume everybody feels the same way, so.
I think there's.
Thanks.
Okay. So, anyway, so anything more on really the current, again, what we were just reviewing with the slide on the current capital.
I just think the big
Budget
capital
this year.
on this, Dave, the big capital pieces, we had 46 million allocated this year. Dave's right, we only have 12 million done. But going forward, you know, the numbers that are in the capital going forward are right around 20. And that's, you know, not real either. I mean, based on, we have to generate enough revenue to be able to do even that. So I think it's just important as we're putting these numbers out there, it's really then going back to what we just said, prioritizing and determining how much we need to spend and what it needs to be spent on. I mean, these are numbers we're dropping in, but we have to have the revenue stream to be able to do that. So if you're making $4 million a year, you know, you have to put it in perspective.
Okay, if we're done there, we can spend a little bit of time on the next 2 sheets, which is really the Public Works Capital Project, which is, you know, something that we generally set early in the year, and I know it's, we try to get these things, agreement on these things early. I think it helps Kevin and the engineering department when we go out to bid that we're able to bid these things early. But this is, I think, what I would call a preliminary list. So any feedback you can give on this as to, again, things that you think are more important than the others, or things that we're missing. Obviously, the big item every year is always our resurfacing, patching, and striping program, $4 million. We also have some carryovers on parking lots, as well as our annual crack sealing program. Some of the new things this year, and you may remember this came up in a couple board meetings. So has been looking at filling some of our sidewalk gaps on Oak Park and Harlem Avenue. So between those two streets, there's about $600,000 in at least the request from Public Works for 18 and 19.
Just so that some
Go
of
ahead.
that, on some of that, we got the one by the high school done. We just went out for a permit for all the ones that we got budgeted, to the state for her to fill those in. So, those are already budgeted, so those might be carryover items.
And 6 through 9 are budgeted, and number 12 is budgeted currently. Just so that you know.
Yeah.
So there are, a lot of these
Yeah.
are, this was a sheet.
Yeah. Yeah, and 191st, again, that's a project everyone's familiar with, and we're, that was certainly something, we're fortunate that grants are paying for the majority of that. And similarly, going on to the next slide, Oak Park Avenue from 159 to 167, which majority of that is funded by grants. Similar with 84th Avenue from 159th to 171st. Freedom Ponds, we talked about, and again, if you remember right, it's not just the construction, but we did agree to add in about $175,000 in additional path and landscaping improvements at the request of some of the residents in the area.
So Dave, for someone like me coming in new, the Freedom Pond, the total number on that's right around 5.4, 5.5. Does that include this?
This is included in the overall number.
In the overall number, right?
Yeah.
And out of that 5.4, we saw how much we spent already. This would be the remainder of
Yes.
the amount.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I want to make sure that
Yep.
I'm seeing it the right way.
Yep. And again,
Can I ask one question?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Maybe Kevin. So when you lay these out each year, so me being new, I'm just trying to understand, do we lay out a kind of a capital project, 10-year project, that what we have to go back to?
Yeah.
So, the life of this stuff ends up being X years, and then we put it into a capital plan that we have to roll back to it if we decide on a 10-year, 12-year, 15-year basis.
Oh, we do that, we do a 5-year plan with our engineers.
Okay,
They look at all the parking lots, and we put that on a 5-year plan.
okay,
Same thing with the streets, that we, the MPM, there is always a 5-year plan for that.
okay.
We do the same thing going back to the facilities, John does the roofs and all the roofs.
Yeah, I figured the facilities you had, this was more the streets
Right.
than that you're tying in that way.
So, yeah, it's all done the same way with 5-10-year plans
Okay.
that are outlook.
Okay.
I've got two questions.
Sure.
Yeah. Number one, are we just done with the fire training tower resurfacing? I know in the past it's been a budget item, but we're considering what's going on with the mental health center. Is that something that's just done now, or do we know?
well, it's in the budget. Do you have any update?
We're doing minimal repair to it. I know the overall, if we were to do everything out there, it's over $600,000
Yeah.
to resurface that whole lot.
But we don't know that we're gonna keep it.
Exactly, so that's why just for the time being, until something, is decided out there, we're just doing minimal patching, in a range of 50,000, just to keep it up for use until we make a decision on what's going
And we
on.
do have reserve funds to do it, so
Right.
we've been funding it every year.
This-
In case we need a research, so the money is there.
And then the second thing, and I know I probably mentioned this 5,000 times, maybe 6,000. 84th Avenue, we're doing it 159th Street to 171st Street. But the part of that road that's bad is St. Stephen's to the dog park. I mean, it's just.
Yeah,
it's
the
just
Cook
garbage.
County's doing that portion.
I know it's a county road, but
No, I mean, they're actually gonna be also redoing that road.
are they really all the way
Yeah.
down? Oh,
That's, before this, so.
Look at that.
All about everything.
Bravo. It's like a third world road out there.
No,
It's
for
just-
159
it's
to
bad.
171st is being grant funded. That's gonna be, that was already let, that's gonna start in spring.
Yeah.
It's already
I-
budgeted.
It's already budgeted, we only went up a certain percentage, I think it's about 20%.
Right.
The other one is, Cook County's gonna take care of the rest, they're gonna be doing patching and some sidewalk work from 171 to.
Is that a JT then? Once that's complete by Cook County, does that become our road then?
No.
So there's no transfer on that?
Not
It's
that
kind of where
portion.
that road from 159 to about 163, we actually own the,
Sides, right?
just the sides,
Yeah.
not the middle of the road, just so the houses can park. That agreement was made years ago.
But the other portion becomes ours, though, right? The one,
No,
Okay.
I don't
Okay.
believe any of it becomes ours. That's not. being
That was
changed.
175th.
I think the long range plans that they were gonna try to JT us, but we can double check on it.
yeah.
So we're positive that the, that 84th Ave from 175th going south, that's on Cook County's budget?
171st.
I can't say it's positive about Cook County budget, but.
We will double check.
They did say that they were gonna do it.
Could you keep us posted and also what sidewalk that they're doing? I know you said sidewalk.
Yeah, it's some of the sidewalks leading out into the roadway are being removed
Okay.
because they should never been put there in the first place because it doesn't meet with another corner. But they're gonna fix some of the sidewalk there, that fix the 88.
Good to know, because the people coming in and out of the church, it's just.
And that's what county says, I can't guarantee it.
Yeah, it's just.
All right, and just to finish up here, again, 175th Street, that is an area that there is a jurisdictional transfer, so that's the carryover in the engineer. And again, fortunately, we're doing well with grants this year. Just as you know, just recently, in the last 2 weeks, received a grant for almost $200,000 for comment path from 179 to 159 to 159. And then there's the extension down to the dog park that we're also working on, so.
For a grant on that?
We don't know, the grant is for.
That's just for the, just the.
Yeah, the rehab.
Okay, I didn't know, I thought the extension is something that has been discussed for a couple of years.
Yeah, and the challenge there has been getting right away from ComEd as well as I think Gallagher and Henry. So that's why that's taking a little bit longer, there's some right away.
So the correspondence you sent out about that grant for the ComEd trail, there's still a lot followed with that, and there's still a lot of negotiating that needs to be taking place, correct?
Well, yes, yeah, I mean, the grant is final. There's an issue that we have a lease with ComEd where they're essentially asking us to take over liability for any type of environmental hazards on the site, and we're trying to negotiate that now. Right now, we cover any environmental hazards, even things that we're not directly responsible for. But the grant is final, so it's. Okay, so. All right, so a few other items, and we'll have more on into this as we get into the actual budget, but as everyone is aware, we've got now a $200 million plus, Oak Lawn Water project. We're working on getting some final numbers, but I will tell you, we just, like in the last week or so, right, got our first debt service bill. So one of the things we will need to address, this is the manager that has to give this bad news, is that we are obviously going to have to look at our water rates now. And this is obviously something we anticipated, in order to pay for some of these improvements. If you remember right, when we did the presentation on the Oak Lawn Water project several months ago, it had some estimated water rate increases, so we will need to start discussing that next year in terms of what we need to do to start thinking.
since, this has been addressed now in the public by you just stating that, I would make a strong suggestion that this village consider some type of utility form, with representation, from the Oak Lawn, water project, and then we could start having some internal discussions on how we're gonna fund this going forward. But I think getting out in front of this and getting a strong campaign, marketing campaign and communication campaign is gonna be vital.
Okay.
Obviously, Tinley Park's not the only municipality that's gonna be running into this scenario, so this might be something that we wanna do regionally. Because this is obviously, this is a very, very big deal, and very expensive.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't think we should be fighting this alone.
No,
I think we should be working with
I'll-
our partners that are.
I'll chat with the other managers about it, how we might do this together.
The other part of it is just, I think we need to educate.
Yeah.
I mean, me, being new, when we sat down to have this discussion a couple months ago, I mean, I had no idea how it was laid out. And I think it's important that our residents understand how serious this is. You know, I mean, it's something we really have no control over. We only have one other option, and that would be to, go to Indiana, and that's an option. But this is the best option, the Oak Lawn piece. Yeah, that would cost a lot more.
Well, we have a long-term agreement, and
Right.
there really is a lot of options.
There is.
You have a system serving several 100,000 people that has no redundancy.
It's scary.
Yes.
So I think it's important that while we're doing the marketing that Jake's suggesting, I think it's good to educate people to how this all works.
That's what I was, we need to fold that all
Yeah.
together. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
similar to what you've already presented to us, but in a regional.
Yeah, I'll talk with the other.
Regional way.
That's a good idea.
And then we need to start looking at, obviously, the financials aspect to this and how it's going to impact our residents, in the pocketbooks.
Which is the big deal, because it's twofold. I mean, not only is you're talking about rate increases, Chicago's gonna have rate increases. We're gonna have to deal with this whole thing, so.
Yep. All right, so that's probably one of the big enchiladas. Then there's a water main on 167th Street. Kevin, anything you want to add there?
It's between Oak Park and Manchester. We've had it in the budget for about a year and a half now. It's the 24-inch transmission line that goes to our post-11 metal tank. We've had several main breaks on it over the years. We got the engineering done on it between either lining it or just replacing it. Both coming in about the same price, but we're still waiting on a Cook County permit, so we've been waiting almost a year to get a permit. So I want to carry this over again.
The difference being between the two, besides, obviously, there's nothing in the financial aspect, but just simply the construction of it.
Right.
Easier to line, but it lasts as long as replacing it.
No, it's, for lining, you don't have to dig up the whole road and replace it. But with this one, with it being so large, the pits are gonna have to be big to put the liner through. So they're still gonna be digging up the road. And with the new rules and regulations of Cook County, when you dig up the road, you have to patch the whole length. You can't just patch small sections. And this is one that you could line only because there's no services coming off because it's a transmission line. The problem with that is we could only really do this during the fall months, so like early spring, because that is a transmission, we have to shut that transmission line down that feeds the tank to be able to line it. Or we would have to bypass it. So, once we get the Cook County permit, you'll see it on the budget upcoming this year. Hopefully we can get it done this year.
Does that normally take that long for a permit?
Not usually, but usually 56 to something.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. All right, so anything more on our whole capital discussion? Because the next several pages get into more non-capital items.
My view of it is just a couple things. Number one, what you just talked about, I think, is a big animal that we have to tackle sooner than later, because that really can affect other things. Knowing really where we're at on that project. Yeah, because that's a big capital expenditure that we're gonna have to make sure happens when they expect it. So I would put that as, one of our top priorities right now is to kind of get our arms around that. I mean, there's other capital projects that are critical, but I'm just saying this one there, I mean,
Yeah.
it's something that we should.
It's the most personal,
Yeah.
it's the most
Yeah.
personal item, because it's gonna affect everyone.
Yeah.
Hey, Kevin, do you know, are we locked into any type of agreement with Oklahoma?
Yeah, they
No longer.
I'm not exactly
It'll
sure.
just be-
It's been for a long,
Just be
it's
signed.
it's long.
It's long.
Didn't we just re-up it? Thought we just, wasn't it last year?
Well, like 3 years ago,
Yeah, it was just redone.
So we really don't have any options.
No, no, we don't. Okay, so the next few pages, so what I tried to do was again take some of the goals from the 2018-19 from the strategic plan, as well as some of the goals the board had set back in September, as well as some of the staff goals, and kind of try to combine this into one, kind of one format. So on the revised PowerPoint you got today, and I talked, again, I think Trustee Mangan alluded to this, and, you know, he suggested to me, and I find this, that I kind of come up at least with my recommendations and what I thought priorities were. So, you know, I've actually, and again, this is ultimately your document, so I have in this revised document put some A, B, and C's. Doesn't mean that, you know, if it's a B and a C, it's not going to get done, but I've tried to do this based on, I think, what I've heard from the board in terms of their September goals as well as other priorities. But getting your feedback on whether you agree or disagree, I think this would be the time to do this. So I'll kind of hit each one of these and then ask for departments for more information where appropriate. So the first set is really, if you remember right, in our staffing study, there was a recommendation that the village utilize more full-time staff rather than a heavy percentage of part-time. And, you know, we've done that for a number of years, and the part-time staff that we have, a lot of them still get the benefits. But, you know, obviously if you have a bunch of 30-hour-a-week employees, you have the potential where you're actually paying more benefits than you are full-time. Some of that, frankly, has been, you know, the difficulty with recruitment for full-time positions when you have residency requirement. So that's obviously been lessened, so that's an issue that makes it a little bit easier for recruitment now. But there's a number of things that I kind of slotted in here, and again, these are some big dollars. These are requests, and of course, the important thing to keep in mind with any personal request is if you're approving it this year, you're approving it for, you know, as long as the position is there. So this is not, unlike capital, this is not a one-time thing. So I think these are the types of things that need some serious discussion. But what I had as my aids were frankly some of the ones that we really already decided that we were going to change, which is namely having a full-time HR person as opposed to the current setup, which was a part-timer and a full-timer, and then making the marketing director full-time. So those I put down as A. There's also requests, as you can see it here, for transitioning some of the 911 positions, from 2 of them to full-time. Adding 3 shift commanders in for the fire department, as well as custodians, adding full-time. This has been a particularly, I think, thorny issue because we've had a very, very difficult time kind of keeping people in that position. Denise can talk about that a little bit. So, again, this is just some of the initial personnel requests we have, and I kind of slotted them under the category of transitioning to full-time. So, is there any just questions at all in that specific area? Okay, go
I
ahead.
think, on mine, the police officer, you had 175, 470 per.
Yeah, yeah.
What is that? I mean, what is that number?
Okay, well, I mean, yeah, I was gonna hit that next.
Glad I had it, thanks. Go back to the regular.
No, I just, if we can, was there any initial questions on these first staffing requests?
No.
Okay.
What's the three shift commanders for?
Chief, you want to address the shift commander issue?
Just a couple of the trustees had expressed interest to determine the net difference of transitioning from our 3 part-time shift commanders to 3 full-time shift commanders. So the amount represented there would be the net difference between what we currently have budgeted for the part-time shift commanders to transition those to full-time.
What would be the benefit of that?
Consistency and having a dedicated shift commander every day instead of potentially 2 or 3 different personnel during the course of the 24-hour shift. We're looking into for supervisory positions. They're responsible for the day-to-day operations of everything that happens out on the street, the manning of the positions that we have, the stations, incident command, control. They're just for continuity of our operations and continuing to develop in other service roles and things like that. Again, we're asked to supply a budget figure for that discussion.
It says plus with the benefits, do we know what would the benefit be per cap?
Well, we don't have the exact hours, but you'll have insurance, you'll have IMRF. That'll be the health insurance IMRF.
So we should, when this, if it comes up again, I think we should have the whole.
The recommended positions will have all the, the total dollars.
This is just an anticipation for the actual budget discussion where you'll be putting in the request.
Yeah.
And then at that time, we're making a decision whether or not we want to budget.
Yeah.
So this is just for the board's satisfaction right now to start thinking about this is kind of where we're going.
And it's fair to say, based on the way I prioritize is saying, the A's, we're gonna make the top priority, unless I hear otherwise. I mean, the B's will be, some we will be able to do and some we won't.
So it's interesting to just look at that and 3 personnel full-time, going to be over $200,000 in that department. It's way over $200,000 most likely. Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Kind of shocking, right?
And I think one of the things, I've talked to Dave on this before the meeting.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have to do, and I think it's important, is to take our salaries and kind of, we're going to lay some things out. We're going to redefine how we look at salaries. And I think it's important that as we look at it, that then we can kind of evaluate kind of the sizes of the departments, what we're paying for departments, and be able to kind of look at that from a different picture that we're looking at it today. So that everyone can kind of, because I think those are the questions that are being raised. We talk about technology. I will say that technology leads in some opportunity to be able to help staffing, and I think those are the combinations that have to happen. So, looking at it from an overall picture, I think is important for the trustees to understand it.
Yeah, I would just like to see where we hurting, how's it hurting the day-to-day operations? Where we would want to make a set an expenditure of well over 200,000.
When we have personnel requests, what we've done in the past, we'll do this year, is each department will have to do a justification memo for each position. And that will spell out why they need it, total benefit costs, things like that.
Chief, is this decision or this request being based upon talking about one department? This would be the start of that, correct?
Correct.
So that's kind of where it's being determined.
It's also 3 positions.
It's 3 positions.
It could be one, there could be a
Right.
process that we go through. It just, Mike, it goes back to your point, what's the benefit you're getting out of it? I think that's your transition.
On mine, you'll see that I don't have really any staffing in there right now. I'm looking into what accounts, kind of doing a small study myself. But I expect to be with some staffing.
Kevin, that was brought up by Dave when I talked to him, and that's why I'm asking him to get a whole layout, the whole big picture of this now. So that, because here's why, as everyone comes with staffing requests, we have to look at the overall picture of the village and where we're at. And I think a lot of us being new, we don't have a full picture of it at a level that we need to have. And I think having a report put together that kind of shows us that, and we can look at that every quarter, I think there's a value that comes out of that. Because then when you're coming to us with requests, we can basically look at how the village is laid out today. Or maybe we change how the village is laid out today based on some of the suggestions that you guys have given in here. So those are the type of things that we can talk about.
Like I was thinking, kind of related to that, you know, what do you do with some of these suggestions? And also they had some of the suggestions for cost savings and revenue funding ideas. I thought maybe some of these A, B prioritization things, we kind of take care of the committee in between now and that March date. We're trying to, you know, because otherwise it's just too big of a, you know, thing to do all at once. I just thought.
That was discussed in schedule, right? You're gonna.
Yeah, well, I
Go
think
through
Mike
committees.
was talking about, even adding to that, maybe some of these new ideas we talked about.
Put them in our actual committees that,
Yeah.
you know, just to
Yeah.
see if you
Discussion.
want
Or
the
discussion.
three personnel people, two person, you
Yeah.
know, as opposed
Great
to
point.
the whole board as a whole.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to what trustee Benito was asking about the police staff study. And again, this is one, of course, you know, we don't know the answer to this yet. We'll expect it, I think, in about a month or so. We'll have the consultant recommendations. I put this down as an A based on the feedback we've been hearing. But again, as we discussed, you know, personnel, particularly police officers, I mean, they're not cheap. So it's they're valuable, yes. They're invaluable, yes. But and again, it's $175,000 per officer. That just there's a one-time cost up front in terms of equipment and, you know, about $50,000. So your annual cost then would be about $125,000. So
But that 50 is at one time.
yes.
So the really cost then going forward would be about 25.
Yeah. So again, I would anticipate we'll get this study. I think we're about a month out from that we can, you know, review this further in Public Safety Committee. We'll have something more substance to kind of review. The next item was really items actually that came up in all three areas, from the board goals to the strategic plan as well as the staff meeting. And this was to do advanced training for mid-level managers with focus on kind of leadership development, succession planning, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that we're really recommending two things. One is an area, if any of you, this is a private sector training process that's starting to become more and more prevalent in the public sector called Lean Six Sigma, which is a process of essentially looking at how you do things and how you can be leaner and do things in a more efficient way. It goes along a little bit with what Trustee Mangan is saying. Are there things that we're doing in terms of just, you know, from day-to-day permits to tickets and things that can be done later, which will then mean we don't have to have the staffing requirements that we have to have. So this is actually, that's, I think Denise was about 25,000 of this, right?
Yes.
And then we're also looking at performance evaluation training, which is really related to our new pay plan, because I know one of the things we talked about is trying to make sure that the merit portion of the new pay plan is that merit increases are looked at in a more comprehensive and consistent way and not as automatic perhaps as they've been in the past. And so the performance evaluation training will assist in giving the senior managers that do evaluations some tools to be able to do that. So,
do we require our employees to seek training throughout the year? Is there any requirements? I know we would obviously encourage it, but
Yeah.
do we require?
well, you know, that varies from department to department. You know, there are certain employees, you know, fire and police certainly have certain training that they have to do. You know, public works, you have like OSHA training and things like that. So there's, it varies from department to department, certainly.
So I mean,
Yeah.
personally,
Okay.
when we sat through the strategic planning and we
Yeah.
discussed the ongoing training of employees, and that was kind of a recommendation I put forth, and
Yeah.
many members did at the time. And I was kind of thinking outside of this, more along the lines of making available resources for employees to be required to go to either a customer training ceremony, training session, or various, I mean, doesn't matter what level of employee you are in our organization, there's still levels of how you interact with people and workplace training and such.
Yeah.
Kind of allocating some funds for that. I mean, then
Yeah, okay, now I understand.
healthy
what you're
organizations
saying.
typically allocate monies for that.
Yeah.
And when you empower employees and find the resources and tools they need, they typically are a better employee.
Yeah.
And I hate to talk about people like that, but I mean, that's when they say, that's just unfortunately how it goes. I mean, you need to do this.
Yeah, and we will have, you're talking about training that really affects everybody. We actually just about a month or so ago did a village-wide customer service training class. We were actually able to do it through our employee assistance program. And I think Denise, there's probably a couple other things that, I remember you and I were talking about, the things that we can do.
Sure,
Remember
yeah,
that?
they have some great resources through
Yeah.
that program.
Yeah.
Another one that will be upcoming probably early next year, or actually, for sexual harassment training, and other mandatory training that.
Yeah.
It'd just be another tool for Denise and the
Yeah.
HR department. I mean, no different than the fire department needing a fire truck. I mean, these are tools that you need in order to have a healthy organization for your
Yeah.
employees. I mean,
Well, we will.
they're very valuable
Yeah.
to our success.
We have a calendar actually we put together for next year that's got some resources that we can roll out. EAP program actually has some great skill builder programs, and they have great training modules that we can mandate for all staff. There's great reminders, great nudges for them to have that experience.
So that might be something, I don't know, if that's gonna require more allocation to your budget, Denise. I mean, you can
Some of
talk
these
with
are-
Dave, please.
Yeah, some of these are fairly inexpensive, but we'll talk about that. Okay. All right, so the next one, again, everybody's familiar with our case study. We are looking to be in a position to bring that back to Trustee Panito's committee in January, so we'll have more information on that in terms of estimated cost at that time.
You wanna talk about your rankings at all as we go through these, or?
Yeah, sure, and.
How about, I mean, you don't have to go into detail,
Yeah.
but you can kind of just give us a one-line sentence
Yeah.
of why you placed where they placed.
Well, a lot of these are important, but everything can't be an A. It's a little bit of the theory. So, I think certainly the pay study increases are important, and I think the training is also important. But I think where the A's are at are things that I heard from the board that are like, are really the top ones. So I think hopefully we can do all these in the budget. I think at least all the A's and B's. Anyway, so going on to the next page, we get into a little bit of, downtown beautification. These are, I did have a couple of C's here. I will tell you, the snow removal is an issue that's been discussed, but I think there probably needs to be some more discussion. This was an issue at committee a couple years ago, whether or not the village should even be in that business. In some towns, municipalities do that, but there's an assessment in downtown. I'm not saying at this point that, I think that just needs some more discussion. I think we're certainly not in a position to do it for this winter. And then in terms of the seasonal too, we are later on, I do have a recommendation to at least add one full-time employee of Public Works as part of the mid-year budget. So some of the other things and again, this is under the whole category of downtown beautification, which is one of the major strategic planning goals. Streetscaping, we really do not have an actual streetscape plan. And so I think Paul and I have talked about this, and one of the things that we need to have standards that when new businesses come in, that there's a plan that they have to follow. So I think you've seen these and done these in other communities, Paul. Yeah, yeah. So that's what that's about. I had, the two that I had an A on are ones, again, that there's already been a consensus on, are actually moving forward on, which is the wayfinding contract as well as the wayfinding implementation. A lot of money, yeah, especially for the implementation, but this was really identified as a critical component of our branding program. And I think it's something that we definitely need to do. So that will be, that's why I have those as 8 priorities. So anything overall on beautification downtown? Anything we're missing or not talking about? No?
The wayfinding isn't just downtown, that's all over.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to be clear.
Yeah, yeah.
There's $350,000, it's a
That's a good point.
You know, it's anywhere they're coming into the village is where we're going to have the wayfinding, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's part of, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a good point. So-
Dave, can I ask you on your streetscaping though, I mean, putting that down for B, and thinking about some of the timing of some of these projects, since we have to have that streetscaping master plan done for those projects. So I'm concerned about it being a B, I guess.
Yeah, again, everything can't be an A. So it doesn't mean that we're not going to fund it. It's just everything can't be an
And you're looking for us to kind of come back to you with what we think our priorities are.
A. Yeah, if there's,
So, I mean, all you're doing is just giving your opinion on it.
absolutely.
And I think that's important that we hear what you're thinking.
Yeah.
But then it really comes back to us
It is.
to be able to say, we're on the same page with you, or
Right.
we think something's more important than something else, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Is it also possible on the wayfinding, we've never talked about this, but wayfinding could be phased. You could prioritize your corridors. So if you felt, for example, streetscaping at 100,000, you could take 100,000 out of your wayfinding implementation. Try to
Good
get
point.
that streetscaping up to an A and maybe phase out the wayfinding.
Always a good thinker, Paul.
Huh?
Always a good thinker.
No, I'm just concerned about the streetscaping, so.
So where would we come, send some of these work through a committee, then come back?
I think you guys can come back and then you can-
There's so many, it seems like you want
Dave, I think, as it goes for the downtown, I think it's been a pretty clear agenda set forth for the last several years. And obviously, again, I think we just try to figure out how to budget for everything and then,
Right.
and then work through it as the year progresses. Because I mean, like Paula just said, I mean, not a lot of these are gonna happen all at once anyways. And certainly, I think we can find the allocation somewhere else to fund it if we need to.
I agree. I
Because,
would
mean,
just say.
here's the concern I have. I mean, we're talking about employees and we're talking about, you know, moving forward with trying to continue a beautiful downtown. And we don't have the personnel to maintain it. We're gonna have a very serious problem ahead of us. So I mean, to classify or to, I mean, we just need to look at that a little bit more. Because it's not just a
Yeah.
point of can we afford, you know, I mean, we can build it, can we afford the perpetual care on it? I think it's the big.
No, it's a good point. Yeah, my only comment on the wayfinding is, that's fine if you want to do it over another year. I'd be a little careful on that if you're gonna jump in and say this is our brand. You know, you should have everything that represents your brand in different places.
But it could, I mean, it could be phased over a year and a half to a
Sure.
2-year project.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
like, you know, 150,000 a year instead of, I mean, budget for the full item and then we could just do a sub, I don't know,
Yeah.
we could do sub to that, but
Yeah.
then classify it down into two.
Well, I think on some of the points, some of the places that you go into the entry of the town, so be on Harlem, some of those permits from the state and forest reserve that we've had in the past, took 16 months to get anyway. So, once the plan is done, then we gotta get the plans to the state where we want to place these projects. Like your new gateway, so.
Well, I mean, we'll have further conversation over this as well. I guess it's more of a philosophical standpoint of how we can fund this.
Sure. Okay. All right. So the next couple items are kind of our very familiar projects. the convention center financing, this is really a revenue issue, and again, this hasn't been finalized, but there is discussions about our hotel tax increasing with the TIF expiring next year. To help with some of the, offset some of the enormous property taxes for the Holiday Inn owners. And then, of course, the mental health center plan. So those are listed as A because those are obviously major economic development priorities. So the next set are really downtown development type projects as opposed to downtown beautification. So again, items that we've talked about. We've slotted in the 350 that was talked about when the playbook was approved. I know there's some debate whether we can afford that, and obviously would be part of the budget process. The only reason why I put it as a B is because I think the two top priorities is, I've slotted completing the TIF and advancing some type of development as A. Got to have the development in order to generate the money to start paying for the playbook. So I think that's why I really put down the completing the TIF and advancing developments. And obviously the associated cost with that, the infrastructure incentive cost as priority aids.
The flip side argument to it is you need to have a supplemental income from the small businesses that are going to drive the surrounding TIF. So it's a circle argument, right?
I understand.
So I appreciate you classifying it as a B at least.
Yeah.
Because I think there is a lot of value to it. I'm working towards it, certainly. I'm working towards the video gaming. We're going to try to allocate specific things.
Okay.
Should have something hopefully present to the committee here in the next month or two.
Yes. Oh, yes, that's right. All right. I'm going to let Pat talk about this, and I know this has been Justin Mangan has talked about this issue. So why don't you talk about this after?
Yeah, we've got an estimated budget cost of $30,000 for the disaster recovery plan. And I do like to note, though, as part of our emergency operation plan, we do have contingencies in there for some of these backup things of what we might do if a disaster hits there. But as Steve Plummer did bring up, as relates to, IT type of stuff for our recovery plan for continuing operations. So the majority of that cost would be for backup for that type of operation to make sure that our systems will be able to continue with that. It sort of moves in line too with some of the things that we have budgeted for the old state police building, of moving that equipment from down in the basement up into a clean room atmosphere. So that sort of builds into some of that, along with the backup 911 center that we're finishing up right now in the PD.
That was, to me, that I thought that was a big animal that we, as a town, have to tackle, because if something did happen, I mean, disaster recovery is a critical element now in any business you run, and the village is a business, no matter how you look at it. So I think it's great that we're moving in that direction, so thank you.
So again, a lot of these, the next set of ones are a little mishmash of various internal efficiencies. The two that I really rate the highest, again, were ones that we've talked about and has been emphasized over and over again as a top priority, and one of them is the camera issue. So obviously we've had discussion of that at the committee, and so we will be adding in the additional monies needed on top of what's already in the budget for this year. I know I've had some questions about the police radio issue, and so a big number, but Pat, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, and I'll actually defer to John Urbanski, but this number is a number that's based on a five-year plan, and it's been an ongoing program that we've had for well over 10 years, that it keeps going every year as far as the different improvements. But I'll turn it over to John just to touch on some of the things with that.
As Pat said, about 10 years ago, we began the upgrade of a system that was extremely antiquated. And as far as my understanding, and I think the police and fire can attest to this, is those radios on your hip are just as important as any other tool you utilize in the field. You know, if we don't have a up-to-date, a system that's working at a 99.99% capability, we've got a chance of a serious issue occurring, and either firefighters or police officers don't have the capability of radioing in for assistance. So we've been upgrading equipment. We've spent the last 10 years replacing all that equipment, but as anything else, it's an ongoing maintenance plan. And if we don't keep the equipment to that standard now that we achieved it this last year, all we're going to do is fall back to a higher fail rate. So as we said, it's a 5-year plan. It's going to be an ongoing program just to keep those radios up to snuff there.
Is there a lot of new technology out on
Always.
the radios?
It's like any other technology.
Every year, I imagine that's changing drastically, right?
Yes, sir. It's like anything else with technology. There's always new stuff coming out, more reliable stuff. But yeah, it's a very large system. We have over 12 receiver sites throughout town, either on cell towers, on facilities. We've got hundreds of radios, portable, mobiles being utilized, and it's all public safety. It's police, fire, public works, and then we have a 4th public safety frequency that gets utilized as a backup. In case there's too much traffic on one or the other, that all departments can utilize secondarily. So it's multiple frequencies and multiple systems, and that.
As we talk that, is that also part of the disaster recovery?
Oh,
If it goes
absolutely.
out, that'll be part of what we look at too.
You
considering how critical
have to
those are.
you have to put a lot of, you look at your cell phone, how many times every day you drop a call, you don't hear somebody, and this is some of the most sophisticated type of technology in the cell phone, where you have a radio system, which is very similar in the sense of you're never gonna have 100% reliability, and it's based on different factors, from environmental to people talking on it to maintenance issues. And as John said, it isn't one and done when we purchase something. There is constant maintenance that needs to be done daily, monitoring the system. It's a critical, one of our most critical items in the village, along with our network, that constantly has to be watched and maintained, because things happen. Stuff breaks down, but the key part is the ability to address those current, concerns immediately. We've been doing a pretty good job based on the outsourced contractual stuff that we have now with consultants and some of our in-town vendors. But we have budgeted in the past couple of years for a full-time, contractual radio person, and that's what is needed, and hopefully we're going to be moving to that very shortly. But it's a process of constantly maintaining a system that's put in there, because it's a necessity. Just like anything, it breaks. And as I make the example of a cell phone, how many times does a call drop,
Right.
Or you can't get through on something every day? And it's a very similar situation.
So with the $1,250,000 that we're looking to do, is that more geared to a whole recreation of new phones, or is it, and some of the things you're talking about here with the radio information, or, I'm trying to get my arm around kind of, how you're kind of figuring this in, and
Well, to your previous question, the technology does update, and we evaluate that technology every year. But just so you understand cost evaluation, if we have a base radio that goes down, a base radio is over $10,000 just for the the equipment.
that's what I'm trying to understand.
And receiver sites, if we have a receiver that goes down, that's $7,000. This is expensive equipment. Portable radios can range from $500 to $5,000 depending on the ones that we're utilizing. So ongoing with the fact that we have the hardware that we need to drive this, as Pat says, we're putting a decent amount of funds to outside consultants, and we've recommended that we look at bringing someone inside to a level of training, and then just adding to that eventually here, so we can keep those costs in-house.
Are we pretty similar to other towns around based on the equipment
No,
we
we're
have?
not, because most towns around us have an in-house radio technology, either department or individual personnel.
Gotcha.
For what we know in public works, we've always maintained it, but it's getting to the point where it's beyond our expertise and
So
knowledge.
should we evaluate this going forward? Is there an opportunity to take us to the level of what these other towns have? Or, I mean, is there a strategic view that, you know, at some point we should be there?
Well, as part of our plan and part of our 5-year plan, as I said, we have budgeted for that full-time, whether it be in-house or contractual, but that will be assigned to us. Like a consultant now, but it's gonna be in Tinley Park, so he's there during the day, he's there 8 to 10 hours. Something happens, we have an emergency response, and he's able to come in to do it. Right now, in some of our major things, and it is an efficiency, but a lot of times, we could call our consultant, and he can log in remotely to try to diagnose things that way. But sometimes we need those situations where we're gonna have to have a response time of less than an hour if it's off-site. But yes, we have, every year have planned and we put that type of contingency in. And then in the last couple of years, we've asked and tried to implement this contractual person to put in.
I mean, just listening to this, I just don't understand why we really don't take a serious view and move on it. I mean, we sit in this room and have discussions about other things that cost a pretty good penny, and to me, I think, I think we gotta get there. So, I don't know how the rest of the trustees feel,
I agree. I use a walkie-talkie every day at work, and I feel like it's my lifeline, really.
As somebody that's certainly heard about this for a couple of years now, and obviously we worked through a lot over the last couple of years, John, I mean, one of the reoccurring things that is always brought up is that it's typically some type of human element that's not making the radio work properly. So again, I'll resort back to my previous comments about training. I don't know if we need, we have the staff that know what they're talking about. Is it worth us going out and finding somebody to come in and train all of our staff on how to operate these units so that we can eliminate that as being a further reasoning for a failure? I'm sure you got a lot to say on that. I just, again, part of the umbrella effect of this training atmosphere of how to best utilize it for you.
I would say in the past 6 months, we've made some great progress of talking with both police, fire, and emergency management and our 911 center about, training, radio discipline, proper maintenance and care of radios. So we are definitely making that a priority, and it is in my opinion that it could be done in-house, just, establishing that priority and saying this is the way that it has to be done. And get everybody consistent across all of the departments of a common program of radio operation and radio maintenance, as John said too, and I would say the police and fire would agree. This is your lifeline, and as part of your lifeline as an individual, it's your responsibility to account for and maintain that piece of equipment. And if there's something wrong, you need to bring it forward, but it's one of your standard checks of your daily operations and daily equipment check of whether it's a viable thing, and if it's not, let's get it turned in, let's let somebody know and get a suitable replacement. But I think our focus, moving forward, we have fully capable people in all of our departments here to institute this and just to make it a priority and set a standard for it.
Next discussion.
Okay.
What is the actual system we have for radios? I mean, compared to like Orland, I know the cops have, there's a lot of logged complaints about radios not working in Brookside, Glen, portables and stuff. Now we have like antennas, am I getting this right, that we have antennas like at various spots in town? But are we gonna, is our goal to switch to, I'm not familiar what the system is with Orland Police, what they have?
No, it's, there's difference. We're on a VHF system. We could go into a 800 system.
Are we the only, like us and Oak Forest, they're like the only ones that aren't on this newer band?
No, we have the band. We have the band, but our operation works solely off of the VHF. But our dispatch center operates on all of those different frequencies and can coordinate in a given emergency. But our specific system is on a VHF system. John, you want to talk about the cost of going to like an 800 system?
We looked at this a couple of years ago. Cook County's or it's an 800 system that we can piggyback off of. The problem we have with that, you know, our determination of why we didn't go to that is once you switch to that system, you now lose the accountability of repair and maintenance like we have right now with our own in-house system. And we all know how well county responds to things, so now let's look at the fact that if we have an issue or an outage, what their response is going to be. It's going to be hands-off on our part, where we're going to just say we have an outage and now we're requiring them to do a repair. If we try to do an 800 system in-house, we looked at that, we were going to be pushing probably close to $10 million to try to replace all the equipment, because it's not just the portables, it's not the mobiles, it is every piece of radio equipment we own in the village to switch over to that 800 system. And again, it's a piece of equipment, it's, you know, something that's going to need to be maintained. I can tell you a lot of the reports you may hear from officers or firefighters by the complaints that our system is garbage, and you know, I've heard these complaints. Most of the time when you actually go back on where that complaint was, it was an internal issue. It was the fact that they had a battery that was bad, or they had an antenna that got mounted on their vehicle that was bad. You know, they grounded out. These are just, again, maintenance issues that we need to get our officers and our firefighters used to the fact that you complain about it, that's your lifeline, well, you need to treat it as such, and you need to maintain it as such. You know, as the mayor states, we need to work on the training of these guys to understand that, you know, it's not the system failing, it's individual pieces that are failing. And to try to switch to a new system completely, you're not ridding yourself of those problems. You're just changing the frequency.
So let's focus on the training before we spend 10 million, if that's okay.
Sounds like a plan. All right, next two items are, again, familiar projects. There is money for Station 2. We do not have financing for Station 3. So, I mean, that is obviously one of these larger discussions we're going to have. If you want to do it, we need to find money for it. So, or we need to do debt service and handle revenue debt.
The other thing I talked to a couple people on this, I'd like to be able to look at a strategic view going out a little bit. You know, as we build Station 2 and we look to build Station 3, there's going to be training, you know, facilities, to be able to just kind of look and see what we would want to look like in 10 years, you know, in that level. So, you know, we're building the next station, we've already committed to that, and then to take it out and kind of just look at what we need to do going forward. What are the facilities that, Chief, you think you'll need going forward? I think it's just important to have that discussion now. It helps to be able to determine the size, what's in the facilities. All of that can happen now, so that we're ahead of the game and we put together a document that really takes I call it the infrastructure. You know, right now our infrastructure has some weaknesses in some areas, and I think this would be a great time to kind of think through what we'd like to look like in 10 years, you know, in that arena.
And then finally, under this particular area, of course, is the water meter issue. Besides the installation of the meters, is the outstanding litigation, which, we don't know the cost of that, but we'll have to put that in the budget. So, the last set in this area really relates to additional facility issues. Pat talked a little bit earlier about item 25 and 26. Essentially, that's one of Pat's priorities of working with the staff on reallocating the state police facility. And again, for those of you who are not familiar with our IT challenge, I'm sure Pat or John would be willing to take you on a tour of how some of our IT wires are housed down there. It's insane.
Let me just be frank here. When I first started in 2015, when I walked downstairs and saw where our infrastructure was, I almost hit the floor. At any given point, we are at a point of, almost at a point of, and I hate to use the word crippled, but being crippled for a long period of time. This is something that just drastically needs to be identified and every bit of it and moved on as soon as possible. I can't reiterate it enough.
Do I have it as an A?
Thank you. Put a plus next to it.
Okay.
And you can certainly elaborate more on it that way. I just wanted everybody to feel the personal feeling I have towards it, so.
No, and you said, and IT has done a great job recently. There's been a lot of things that have moved to the cloud environment from downstairs where they've eliminated some of the servers and different things like that. But bottom line is, you know, all of our radio stuff and a lot of other things that are down there do need to be in a proper room. And given the situation with the state police vacating those premises, it gives us the option of not having to really build anything and utilizing that current space to, you know, design and put something there.
Let's bring up the state facilities. Have we been paid by the state yet for their rent? They were backdated for a long time.
Still behind
Still
on it?
behind about 4 months.
4 months.
It's about to go in rate.
That's about, yeah, if you're a state vendor, 4 months.
And what's the totality of the 1 month period?
It's only about 10.
Well, that's great that we're moving on that, but that's something that really needs to
Yeah. The next item, the upgrade to the Carlson Center and council chambers. This was an item we've discussed, I think in light of especially us now filming the meetings and occasionally using this room for overflow. We have money in this year, we just really didn't have enough. So, you know, I don't know if John or Donna, you want to just touch on this briefly in terms of what the 160,000 that we'd like to get, 156,000,086.
Well, we have, as you know, we have the cameras recording our videos here, and, it's our plan collectively to get the cameras to be in a fixed system as opposed to constantly being carted around on the tripods. Along with that, it's the interconnectivity between here and the council chambers. If we ever need to overflow like we have had in the past, where we'll have a camera and a microphone that will interconnect with your guys' monitors up in the dais. It also allows us to have the capabilities of, like you see in the PD Joplin Center, where we have 2 monitors here that can be utilized for bringing in, external video, audio. So we'll have 2 monitors, will probably be housed behind where I'm sitting here, where it can be used for, AV display. Again, with everything interconnected.
TV doesn't work over there?
It's a nice TV. We can use it, but we're looking to upgrade a little bit.
Should we pay for the voucher to recycle that?
We'll have to do a drive just for replacing that TV. But yeah, that request is to, like I said, not only just do an upgrade here or do an upgrade in council chambers, but have it so it has the interconnectivity, so we can utilize it as an extension of the council chambers.
Okay. All right, the last item, again, related to the overall goals. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking at, the new software in the community development department. And this would also allow us, right now, people have to go get a permit in one area and pay in another area. And this would basically allow us to essentially have money's taken in community development. You still have to work out the financial procedures and how all that works. But that's, and again, that's a ballpark number. I am done.
On this one in particular, I'd like to see it changed to an A for certain reasons. We've had many complaints, Brian and I have talked about it, it's not very easy back there. People come in, they can't take cash transactions at all, without it. It's in a major need of a renovation, and I think we need to simplify and make it a little bit easier for staff and community development.
I don't disagree. As I said earlier, this is the easy part of the budget when you get to identify all the things you want to fix. The hard part is going to be, we can't fix all this. So, everything can't be an A. It's because it's.
Yeah, this one has to be. But, and then the other thing in regards to the cameras, John, how many areas do we have left that we were targeting for cameras?
I think the list has almost 10 intersections on it.
It's an A, and this is great. I don't know how many areas we're looking at. I think we need to you know, before we start moving forward on some of the other stuffs, to me at least, some of my, you know, key issues, which I think is very important, is the safety. You know, if we're gonna increase the density, you know, I believe this staffing study is gonna come back, we're short on a lot of police officers. You know, I think we have to work on our corridors, you know, on our borders for the cameras. I think those are some of the key issues that we have to worry about funding first before we're, you know, we're doing some pet projects is, you know, if we start redeveloping some of these businesses or, you know, projects on Oak Park Avenue, it's only, you know, the police are short-staffed as it is, it's just gonna make it harder on them. And, you know, and to add to it, in the public works. I mean, all these events we're doing, they're understaffed. We don't have enough people to, I think some of the pet projects are great, I agree with them, but I think some of them we have to worry about staffing first, because without public works, without the cameras, without the safety, without our police officers, I don't see the value of it. It's just gonna make it harder on them. You know, they can't get anyone to do their, sign up to do the events now, you know, that we have. You know, so next you're gonna see John and Kevin out there, you know, taking down, you know, barricades. So the more we build, which is great, and, you know, in downtown, we really have to look at the hours that we're putting our public works employees and our police to handle that. You know, I don't believe we have the staff to do so. So those are some of the things that I personally would like, you know, is a key issue for me.
I think with the cameras too, to go to that point, I think the analytical piece of the cameras is just as important as the cameras. You know, the other things that we're trying to tie in with the cameras, because the analytical piece that we're trying to tie in, that's more of a pre-situation where if, you know, information comes in right away. I think there's some value that comes with that. So I think as we do the cameras, we got to make sure that we have that package included and tied in, because I think there's some positive things that come out of that piece of it.
But most of that's gonna be after the crime's committed, you don't get the camera. you
Which
get
is
the plate,
important,
you don't get
but the you know, you have a car that's been stolen that comes into town, it kicks in, bam, you know, it goes right on. Those are the type of things we want. So the cameras are important, but I do think that the other piece of it is just as important.
So if you could, 28's on my priority list as well, if you could put that in your notes. I think we really need to help them back here.
Okay, yeah, and again, I think, you know, all these projects.
Has any of that discussion been had in committee at all?
No.
Like this back here?
No.
Because, I mean, there are probably some efficient ways to do that. I mean,
Yeah, I think there's some
And
other.
I don't disagree at all, by the way.
But maybe there's
It's a
other
great
ways to
point,
do it.
But I think we need to probably work that out, work it out.
Yeah, there may be other ways to do it. So I think
Something about the cashier.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
can do
I mean, I
that
was
right
talking-
now tomorrow. We can put a machine back there, but
With the
currently
clerk.
there has not been staffing to actually
Yeah.
potentially man it. So
Yeah, yeah.
we've had it all along that we could have
There's a
put
lot of
one back
things.
there, but it was more due to, we didn't want one person alone back there sitting there with the, things like that.
Maybe you could work out a couple of options and discussions and maybe bring it to a committee or something like that.
I'm just bringing it up now just because of budgeting. I want
Yes.
I know
I want that, you know, high on the list.
last year when I was in building and planning, and Paul had a couple of ideas and where technology could streamline things, you might want to talk to her about it too. So there's some permitting efficiencies there, that type of stuff.
Yeah, in general, and I want to say, you know, all the projects on here, and you may have just been using the word just in general, but these are well thought out projects. I wouldn't characterize any of the ones, at least that we recommended, as pet projects. They're all valuable, and you're right, we need additional staffing in all those areas. We cannot do all the additional staffing we need. I'm gonna tell you that right up front, without some huge revenue. We are not gonna be able to address all the needs we have, police, public works, and other areas.
No,
That's where we're gonna have to make some decisions.
I get it and I agree. I'm just saying before we're spending taxpayer money for some of these projects, and I think we need to take staffing into consideration before we're spending taxpayers' money, and if, you know, I can't wait till the staffing study comes out. But you know, Public Works and the police department are short, in my opinion. I think they're really short.
We are. Okay. Anything else in this area? So what I want to just hit, and then we're going to get to the point where you guys feedback. So as I mentioned, most part of this day is really talking about budget, but it's also, you know, there's other strategic priorities that have been either brought up in the strategic plan or in the staffing study, and even in some of my goal setting that, and these are, I don't have recommendations at the point, but I wanted to just kind of get this in everybody's horizon as things that need to be addressed. Some of these are internal, a lot of these you see are internal to actually two departments in the first page, treasurer's office as well as the clerk's office. So I'm sure, you know, Clerk Therian at some point will have recommendations on some of these, as well as Brad. But the first two, no secret that for an organization our size, we don't have a purchasing person. That is unusual for an organization this size, and there's a lot of inefficiencies. There's a lot of inconsistencies sometimes in how we do RFPs and things like that. This would be valuable. Again, that's a resource to have a position like that. Purchasing card program is a program I've been involved in one town that does this. It's essentially it's a program that allows purchases to be made more efficiently. You can also get actually rebates on it and generate money. You do have to have some control time. That's one of the downsides. So that's a pro and con issue that we need to talk about probably the internal auditor position, I think everybody aware, the staffing study did suggest that, and we said let's complete this fraud assessment review first. And I think once we're ready to discuss that probably leads to this discussion. The consultants that we hired to do the Village Hall staff study also suggested we look at whether some of the financial functions currently in the clerk's office move to the treasurer's office. That's a lot of discussion, which frankly I haven't had in any great deal with either the clerk or the treasurer. The Saturday issue is one that I know Clerk Therian has had some discussions about. But again, I'm just pulling things right out of the staffing study that we recommended. So that's some staffing study related issues. Actually, and there's one thing I meant to put on here, but I did not. So we did have some discussion at our retreat. So we've done staffing studies for Village Hall. We're doing it for police. And I know Kevin has brought this to my attention, and we talked about it with the chief as well as Pat, is that we still haven't really looked at the other departments. And we had some discussion. I know there's been some concerns in some corners about, you know, using consultants for all these. So Kevin and Chief and Pat are going to be doing internal staffing studies this year. The board is okay with that during the next year to kind of look at it and without bringing it to council.
So you said
Kevin, Chief, Fire Chief, and then Pat Carr. Those are the three departments that really haven't been this Pat Carr yet. Yeah.
If I could just comment, I could, I would certainly need more detailed information before I could make that determination as to whether or not financial functions be moved to the treasurer's office. And also, the staff and I are in agreement that Saturday hours are, the amount of justification, or the amount of transactions we have to really justify us being open on Saturday. And as our IT infrastructure improves and more online transactions are conducted, that'll further impact staff hours as well.
And I would say, as far as the clerk's office, I think they should stay on their own instead of being moved to the treasurer's office.
That was, just so I understand, that recommendation came from the staffing study, correct?
Yeah, and so the tie-in is if your goals that you gave me in September was to review and implement every recommendation of the staffing study. So these are the ones that are still outstanding. So I'm kind of just putting it on the radar at this point, so.
And that was all based off comparables as well, right? Other municipalities,
Yes, it was,
how
yes.
their organizations are run.
That's
So
where
we're
they
kind
had-
of like the apple.
We're not, right.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So here's some other issues that came out of actually our staff retreat. And again, I'd be happy to get any feedback, but I think, we've had a lot of changes in the board, a lot of changes in staff. To do some type of team building next year, we think would be a good thing. Get everybody working together. Another item is, I think, one of the things we need to do better, again, this is not really a budget item, is getting more information out to the public about what, all the good things that our employees do, but also kind of getting to know who they are, how long they move, what their skills are, and I think just letting our residents know, essentially what they do and who they are. I think that would be very important, I think, for education.
Can I just say something about that?
Yes.
Being new and being only here 6 months, we don't toot our horn around here as much as we should. You people sitting in this room do a great job. And my struggle is there's a lot going on here that are very positive that we don't talk about. We talk about very specific line items, but we don't talk about all the things that are happening that are good. And I think all of us kind of need to work on that. I think we have to figure out a better forum to be able to do that, because this town is a very big town, and you guys do a lot of positive things that aren't being thrown out there as what's going on on a day-to-day basis. So I would say that this is a very, very important line item that should be looked at going to the OET.
I agree, that's why I asked for a full-time marketing director, so that our story, all of us, could be told.
I briefly talked to Dawn about that as well, and she mentioned that more information would be put out via social media, so I think that would be
Something that may be overlooked, and I'm not casting judgment one bit. For instance, the past weekend with the holiday events, I know I ran into multiple employees throughout the weekend, but maybe making a more assertive effort to attend like the parade and walking with the village float, or coming to the tree lighting ceremony, more staff members being present, getting yourself immersed inside the community might be a better push from the administration's end, just to make reference to that. Clearly understand that everyone has a schedule and that there's important things that you have going on in your life. So I'm not saying that it's a necessity, but it might be a good way to kind of promote who we are and what we do.
Another area which was, again, part of the board goals from September was the,
Can I make another suggestion?
Okay.
Mike just pointed out, and I've passed I just realized that in Mokina, they opened up the indoor go-kart track, and that might be a fun little team building exercise that we wouldn't use taxpayer money for. So I just want to see most people get run into the side or something in a go-kart. That'd be kind of fun.
you like the official on running?
Yeah, I think we should all do it.
That would be fun.
Or like a paintball exercise. I mean, it's something that we could take out some aggression, maybe.
Escape rooms.
Escape rooms.
MMA.
There you go. I mean, let's get fun with it. I think we should.
Okay.
I think it should be fun. And again, it doesn't have to be a village taxpayer expenditure of funds. We can do something.
150 next year, Portland, they have one of those boxing rings.
Sign up. Let's go.
Whoa. Shake.
Okay. All right, moving on. So I know that the issue about the spending the strategic plan, as well as the discussion in September about improving the quality of candidates and the hiring timeline. So let's kind of break that out a little bit. A couple of things with the hiring timeline. One of the things we really do need to look at, there are still some things with our civil service. I think the commission does a good job, but it adds a lot of time to the process. And I think it's something we really need to look at in some of our positions. We have a position that's just opened up in Public Works. I think now we're going to have to do a new list. That wouldn't happen in any of the other towns I've ever worked in. We would have had ads out, we would have, and it's, there's some things, you know, that, there's a lot of things in there. This was approved a long time ago by referendum, but it doesn't mean it necessarily have to be all improvements through there. So I think that's something we need to look at, certainly in conjunction with the commission.
I think the sooner the better.
What committee does that need to go on so we can get?
Let's get moving.
Probably trustee Pania's committee.
I think that needs to be moved.
I think the biggest thing with the civil service too is you never get to interview the person, it's just who you get off the list.
Right.
So.
Well, there's reasons for it. but
Right,
I think
exactly.
The balance could be
There
struck.
is.
Yeah.
And I'd love to have that.
Okay.
Well, yeah, through that, yeah, thorny issue.
It's been talked about briefly several months ago, the reappointment process, again, kind of, it's an unusual process. You know, from an individual coming from outside, it presents another reason to hesitate when taking a position, to be very honest. Especially, you know, if they're coming from afar, where they're moving their family, and you have to tell them, by the way, you may not be reappointed, even though that hasn't been our history here. To an outside person, that can be, it's an obstacle. So I think that's something that should at least be discussed.
But it does, you know, my view on it, it goes back to how we lay out, and I think some of the things that Denise's group is doing with, you know, the annual reviews and all the things that are being going on. I think that's the value that comes out of doing those.
Yeah.
And making sure, and this is another training tool, to make sure that the staff understands that when they go through that process yearly, how important that is for each individual to understand where they're at, you know, as far as from an employee day-to-day job, you know, situation. So I think there's some things that are going on now that will better that, but I do think that we got to take that next step to kind of, you know, make sure that that's finalized in the right way.
Yeah.
The other thing that we don't have here, and I think it's critical, is when we hire people, people need to want to come to Tinley. And right now, there's not there's some concerns out there, you know, because of just the image. And we need to talk about that, you know. We sit in this room and we pretend, but I can tell you, I've talked to a couple individuals that didn't even go into the employment process with the village on certain jobs because of the image. So, you know, there's some things here that we just have to put on the table and be honest about, you know, because, it's hurting us.
It is. We've taken a beating, and the media the last couple of years on it, it's hurt us.
And our responsibility as new trustees, I mean, yes, we have to go backwards in some form or fashion, but the main objective is to move forward and try to improve what we have here.
Last item, a little bit related to a previous item, but I would tell you in some of my past communities, we would have trustees and staff talk about $192,000 grant that we got. You know, great job that was done in snow plowing, you know, type of work police and fire did. We just, and it's just, we just don't get enough info out in that form about all the good things we're doing. We need to change that. And then just a couple other things. We're looking at kind of a reorganization of monthly reports to try to make them a little bit more readable. And I think this came from several departments about improving communication within the organization across the department. So a lot of good things, a lot of these things all related. I've got one more page before I'll let this board talk here, but so there was some other strategic plan items. Again, some of this is a little bit redundant, but one of the items that came up that's a goal for this year is looking at our land use building regulations. We do need to update our new comprehensive plan, but one of the things that Paul is working on with her staff is looking at the legacy plan, some of the areas that are discouraging businesses from coming here, such as requirement that you have to make your business residential in certain areas if there's a certain amount of damage to the property. Some of our, Patrick Colvin has talked to me, some of our commercial industrial codes are frankly not as competitive as they are with some of our neighbors. And so that's a couple areas we're going to look at. Now that we have filled the business retention position, we are looking at doing a survey next year. Panduit headquarters property, this is an area, this is again off the strategic plan. That's certainly one of the things Patrick is working on. Yes.
Last time I remember hearing about that property, they were talking about residential. Could we look at something new? Is there interest someplace?
We, I don't think, Paul, we've had any additional interest in the Panduit property from any developers recently. No.
Are you talking, you track business with good paying jobs at Panduit HQ?
Yeah.
So that's talking about 191st Street, right? Not.
Yes,
I think
yeah.
you're speaking of
Yes,
the-
this is about 191st. I think you might have
This is
guessed
their,
it.
so,
Okay.
I think the discussion is basically we're trying to tap into their think tank to find out if there's anybody we can go out to find, to bring and develop some of those corner parcels.
Those
to-
properties around it.
Right, to stimulate, what their already needs are.
In another business.
But yeah, people that they work with, organizations that they need, yeah, exactly.
But-
Market our land. that we
But
have.
the old Panduit is also an issue too. 'cause
Yeah,
yeah.
I just was making sure that I understood what the meaning of this.
Yeah. And then again, all the things we're doing with the village brand and one of the goals that Pat continues to work on, we have, one new user now, maybe this, continue to look at other potential users.
Right, with the backup center being brought online with the PD and the clean room concept and the move of the equipment up there will give us an opportunity to bring on other municipalities that might want to partner with us with the 911 center. We really haven't been able to do it that much with anybody else simply because we're lacking some of the redundant system and then also where our equipment was stored was an issue. So.
All right, so, Paige, this is really for additional feedback from the board. Are there any major items, budget priorities not on this list? And I kind of identified top priorities with some of my rankings. Is there anything not on that list or anything you vehemently disagree with? Or you partially disagree with?
One thing I'd like to add to that list, Dave, that I didn't see on there, I think is critical is especially with the winter coming, I think we need to have our assistant public works director. He should also have a vehicle to take home instead of, his water main breaks or there's something. He's got to run to the shop, he's got to move equipment, or he's got to get to his vehicle. He lives in town. I don't see the problem with it. It would save a lot of time. He could be first on the scene instead of the time he takes, driving home, especially for the water main breaks and stuff like that. But that's my thought. I think John should also have a take-home vehicle because I think it's important.
So-
It doesn't cost us much for him to have a vehicle to take home. A lot of people have vehicles that they take home. And one of our key employees, I think, that does not have one.
So, that's fine. I would recommend probably that whole issue. So several years ago, it was even before my time, the village implemented a policy where they were trying to reduce the number of take-home vehicles, where essentially people would be grandfathered in, and as people left, it would really only be, like I think the manager, the police, and the fire chief that would get take-homes, and we were going to work out an allowance program for those folks. So I think there's there's pros and cons to the whole take-home vehicle for a lot of positions, including mine, because there's other options. I think that should, that's
No, I
a whole
know.
discussion.
But that was all started by a private citizen that was complaining about the vehicles. I believe it brought up a lot of issues, but this is one of them. I think it's key that, you know, he's our assistant public works director. He's not driving to Tennessee. I mean, public works, you know, and, you know, for yourself and for Pat and, you know, our chiefs and our police officers and, you know, our fire department. Those are key elements of this village that, you know, that need to have it. It's not like you're giving your, you know, your community development director a vehicle. These are key elements, I believe, of your village that should.
And I'm not necessarily, I'm just saying, I think we should probably, this board has never really talked about what is going to be the policy. And I think it just shouldn't, the decision shouldn't just be about the assistant public. We should probably talk about it.
Yeah, if anyone else had any other, you know, I'd be more than willing to listen to that, you know, any other ideas that someone has on other vehicles that, you know, maybe be open to, but I mean, especially being public works, that's a key position that, you know, should be able to, you know, get on the scene if he has to as quick as possible.
I just would like, for me, I'd like to know who has it, you know, that would probably be something, that's probably a great discussion.
I think it's a good committee discussion.
I mean, I'm not against it, but I just think it'd be good to know.
Yeah, I mean, we have firemen like that don't live in town that have vehicles, and, you know, it's a key element. I'm not a fan of someone that does not live in this town having a vehicle, but I can understand. I've had a conversation with the chief, and I kind of understand his point. It's something I'd be willing to talk about a little bit more. Not 100% sold on it, but I understand the chief's point. You know, we had that conversation, but, you know, we have part-time firemen that have vehicles, you know, that don't live in the town, but our public works, you know, assistant director does not. That doesn't sit well with me.
Anybody else have any items they'd like to discuss? Top priorities for the year? I think you hit all the major ones in the head, Dave.
I just mine's not a top priority, but can we make the village, the vehicle stickers every 2 years? So that we don't know that's labor and the clerk's office is scrambling.
Actually,
Just
when's the last time we
Just
got
renewed
the
this year.
analysis on that? I remember Clerk Ray used to give us a rundown of,
I put it in the monthly report.
that was in the monthly?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's released every month. And, yeah, we've had this conversation, and I think as our technology improves and our options expand, things will change. But for now, we just don't have any viable options given the current.
Is that typically run in the red?
No.
There's not, I mean, it's
No, we're not
it's
running
break
red.
even.
No, we take
break
in about
even?
700,000 or something.
Yeah, Brad.
And what do we expend
That's
on?
good.
It goes to local roads. Oh, to.
But those are the ones that buy the
About
stickers.
20 or
There's probably a lot out
30,000.
there that aren't even buying them. You know, I mean, that revenue could go up as well.
The initial, it's the staff cost that is the big cost on
Right.
that. Takes up a lot of time for clerk's office.
So what is it, a year, 25, so it make it 50, and it goes for 2 years.
Our big consideration is the senior sticker, because
Free.
honestly, at $1.50, those aren't worth our mailing or.
And aren't they the ones that
Just
typically
make
are the
them
ones
free
that
for the
purchase it?
seniors.
They're probably the largest percentage of, for a large part.
Right.
Yeah.
And each year, the seniors increase more and more, you know,
There are more and more
with the
seniors.
aging population, so. And you can see that in the numbers. Yeah, I'm very interested in exploring alternatives, so I will.
All right, thanks, Kristen.
No other trustees have any other priorities they want to discuss?
I just want to say, I thought you guys did a real nice job this time around. I thought it was a nice plan. I like the time frames and just kind of where we're going with this. And most of the ideas you had, even some of those cost savings and the rest of the I like a lot. Obviously, the devil's in the details, getting it together, balancing it out. My big thing is that staffing study pay plan thing. I think maybe we got to put that on our agenda somewhere along the lines. We kind of talk about it one more time before staff goes through it, so we kind of know.
Yeah.
'Cause that's a big part of the budget.
Yeah, I'd like to sit down with you.
And the police business too.
Yeah.
which we're looking at.
Yeah, Denise and Sam have been, we're close to finalizing, so maybe we before we bring it to committee, we sit down with Denise.
I appreciate that, yeah.
Okay. So what, sorry.
No, that's pretty
So
much
what's
what
our
I-
next step, Dave? How do we have to bring it to Public Works, or you want to have a call for that to discuss vehicles? With the winter coming, I feel very strongly about our Public Works having a vehicle. How do we discuss that? Or do we have to wait for a call?
I would recommend bringing it to Public Works Committee. I mean, again, I thought you were talking about for next year. I would recommend a mid-year if you're gonna make it, if you're gonna do it, I would recommend you do it first.
Isn't there, we don't have any pool cars that are available currently? They can just assign them? I mean, what was the specific, there are, I mean, I know there are. What is the specific reason why he doesn't currently have one? I guess, if we're gonna have a conversation, let's have the whole one.
John,
I have a vehicle that I utilize at work because of the policy that the village manager speaking of, with my promotion, that the amenity was removed from the offering for the department.
So he got promoted and he lost his vehicle?
When, basically, we've been reducing the number of vehicles as people have been leaving positions. That was kind of the informal policy that's, and again, this was put in place, I don't know.
Since we're new, it'd be great for us to go back over it.
I just would
Every
not
time
make
we
it-
look at something
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
past, you know, we're evaluating something that someone else has done. We've found that, you know, in the new times today, it might be different. So it'd probably be good to just, you know, maybe go
Right,
through the
but-
policy and talk through that.
And there's pros and cons to it, because a lot of towns are moving to a system where they give employees allowances. And, you know,
Taking
because
away all
it's
the
expensive, you gotta make, there's no cost to do
I
it.
get all the board members a list of cars who has
Yes,
what, and then
yes,
put it on.
yes.
Yeah, just how do you give someone a promotion and then
And then the cost,
promotion is
Dave.
losing their car?
The cost, you know,
Yes,
the cost
yes.
that they incur. I think it'd be a great discussion.
So that all started, okay.
All right, so really the last thing is just this vendor items, and again, these were items approved by the previous board that they weren't certain if they wanted to move forward, so what we do is we budget like a half year. So really, there's only 4 items. So my recommendation is the staff account. For a variety of reasons, I would hold off on that. One, I think as everybody's aware, we're in the process of hiring both an assistant treasurer as well as another staff accountant. We need to get those in place. Frankly, we've also got this side discussion that came up with the clerk's office. And right now, we just need one, get the people that are already in the budget in place. And I think we need to make some decisions where the treasurer's office is going, I think, before we implement this for this year. The community service officer's hour increase, that was something I know the chief had recommended, and I would recommend that we move forward with that. Okay, yeah, this is, I'm sorry, yeah, all right. The line on this, it should be, so the waiting for staffing study actually goes with the community service officer, and then the chief agreed with this, is let's get that staffing study done first before we hire a new CSO. And then the maintenance worker, yes, Kevin is very short-staffed, and I would recommend him move forward with that right away. So, any disagreements with any of those? Okay. And again, the schedule we've really already talked about, so we will hold this room for March 3rd, and it sounds like we will have to have, I think, some of these issues that came up today discussed in committee, but we'll obviously talk to the committee here about these. That's it.
Anything from staff?
Thanks for your time.
Thanks
and
again.
effort.
Thank you.
Where's the
We got
pizza?
33 million.
2 hours and 21 minutes, it's not bad.
We stayed till noon, we got pizza. No.
Goodbye.
I said, if we had stayed till noon, would we have got pizza?
Anything else on the board? Item 4, receive comments from the public. Public comment, feel free to step forward.
appreciate you letting me come and comment real quick. A lot of the stuff I actually agree with on the wish list, the IT stuff, fully support. I'm actually working for a business that their new initiative to get rid of as much paper as possible, going all IT. I mean, I'd be supportive of everybody having iPads right there instead of all the paper that's here at this table. Big cost savings alone on that will pay for the iPads for everybody. I guarantee that the state's done that. My firm's doing that, fully support. Just any IT upgrade, just make sure that everything is secure. There's no really hack. Uber can get hacked, Equifax can get hacked. You gotta just make sure that back door's closed. The only concern I really had, I didn't see as a priority. I'm a Metro commuter. The 80th Avenue station, there's 2 stairwells that have been closed for probably 6 months. And that's 5 months too long. For me, I'm a healthy guy, I'm pretty agile. Had last couple weeks, had some wet days where people were slipping because it's human behavior. They're not gonna go to the open stairwell, they're gonna go to the quickest path to their car, which is down that slope. And so that needs to be a priority. I would say fix it now, send Metro the bill, if that's what it takes. I know the folks over at Metro really well. If you need my help, I'm more than happy to help the village, but that needs to be fixed now, because that's the #1 conversation I hear every day at the train station. Every day. And the liability and risk you guys put yourselves in as a village, not having that fixed. So that's the only concern. I didn't see it as a priority. That was concerning to me that it wasn't there, because that's just a small local need that can be addressed tomorrow if you guys wanted to. So that was it. Thank you.
Mr. Fiedler, I'm certain that John Urbanski or Dave might give you a full update on that. I know it's an ongoing process, and it's certainly something that is prioritized on a high level amongst the voters that I'm aware. But I'm certain that they'll be able to get you an exact response to your questions.
I wanted to ask about can we not build reserves for, like, I saw this year where you guys were moving money out of the water fund to the general fund, and I've seen it within I think it was a public safety fund into the general fund. Can we not build a reserve up for, like, this water expense we're gonna be having? Is that something we can do?
That's a discussion that has to happen internally. I think it's, we don't, the hardest thing right now is that points are well taken, because we don't know what that cost is gonna be. And it can be pretty expensive, so, I have not talked to Brad on it.
Yeah, I would just.
I think that's why we've made it one of the priorities today, that it really has to, we have to get our arms around it pretty quickly.
It just, that was one of the questions, because it seems like we moved a lot of funds around, even, the money we got back from the paramedic service or the outsourcing of that, why does that get moved to a general fund? Why wouldn't that stay in that area? Why wouldn't they keep control of that money? Staffing study, one thing I know we look at each other, different surrounding areas, but aren't we unique where we're trying to build up, right now, our economics, bringing in new businesses more than that? Wouldn't we need more staff in those areas? The same with our marketing area. I feel like they're so light in those areas, and what we're trying to accomplish in the next couple of years, and how we're going to do that with that staff. You talk about too about having more staff coming to these events, but the fact that you guys have it made it so that people live outside our community now to work here, are they gonna, they're gonna want to go to their events? That's one of the reasons I think it's important to keep people living here, because then these are their community events. It's hard for them to go to their community events and our cars. I have to say, most companies are getting away from giving out cars. My company did. We are giving out allowances now. It's more than just the expense of purchasing that car, which I understand we get at a better rate. It's the insurance on that car, it's the maintenance on that car. It's a big hit. Most companies are doing away with it. But allowances, I think people should be given allowances to purchase that car. If they need to use it, whatever you base when people need cars, whatever that reason is. And the same thing I want to just say about, talk about training and talent, keeping your talent in your village. Most companies, I think, now have gone to talent management systems where people have goals. They have, if they're going to come up with their goals, what do you want to accomplish next year? And then they're rated on those goals. did you meet your goals? Instead of just giving everybody a flat amount, I feel like that always encourages, it discourages the good people from working hard because everybody's getting the same rate. Where if everybody has a set of, they come up with what they want to accomplish this year, and then they reach for that. If they get there, they get a bigger percent. I mean, that encourages the harder working people. I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. No other comments from the public? I'd ask for a motion to adjourn our special committee of the whole. Second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.